This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you by Howell Wealth Management. On the Helping Healing Humor podcast, we talk about anxiety and stress and its impact on our everyday lives. We know that finances, including planning for retirement, is one of the leading causes of stress. It can be confusing and overwhelming. There are differing opinions on the best approach. It can be hard to know who to trust. For our retirement planning, Whitney and I trust Greg Howell of Howell Wealth Management at Northwestern Mutual. Greg is professional, knowledgeable, and accessible. He looks at the whole picture and thinks outside the box to create ways to help you reach your financial goals. Retirement planning can be especially challenging for ministers who do not have the benefit of a 401k, but Greg's expertise and creativity can get you on the right path and give you confidence for the future. Text him to schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at 931-638-1576. Be sure to tell him Ben and Travis sent you.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. Of course, Will is back with us from Africa, and this episode is brought to you by Staying Alive Disco Dodgeball Tournament, coming to you in just a couple of weeks. Travis, what do you think about it?
Well, we're recording this on Friday, I believe the last Friday in July, which means we're a week out. This coming Friday, when this airs, is the deadline for registration. So get your team registered. If you've got a youth minister, a youth deacon, or maybe you're organizing the youth of your church, let's go. Get a team together. It does not have to be a youth group. You can bring a school team. Wilson Central, Mars Hill can put a team together. Come on down, and you can get more information at that, benandtravis.com/store. If you can't make the dodgeball tournament, we're going to be broadcasting it on Facebook, possibly TikTok, possibly YouTube. You can also buy the T-shirt, and all funds that we raise goes to Team Ben and Travis for St. Jude. So let me just put the pressure on you, the full court pressure. It's going to be exciting, going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be goofy. It's going to be off the wall. And the championship matchup, we're going to try to get a disco ball, but we need to know if you're coming on August 5th so that we can proceed and go ahead and get that stuff lined up. We'd like to get your roster so we can do some crazy intros. But man, I'm excited. It's a good mixture of fun things. We will not be discoing. I don't know if that's what's holding people up. That we will not be discoing. There may be some disco music.
Just dodgeballing. So if your moves dodging the dodgeball could be claimed as being dancing, then we'll take it. But we need teams, and you can bring one team from your church or school. You can bring 5 teams or 10 or 30. We don't care. So long as it's mostly teenagers. You can have one adult on the court at a time.
And you need at least one female to start the match. And we're not using the Destructo balls. We're not using the plastic ones that bing when they hit your face and leave you with a scar permanently for life. We're using the little foam balls. And yes, I feel a little like I need to turn my man card in for even saying that, but that's what we're using. So we're trying to dispel any of your fears, and we're trying to raise money for St. Jude. It's a great cause. Will, how are you doing, man? It's good to have you back on. I know you've traveled to Zimbabwe, which is fun to say.
It is. It's a super cool place to be. The internet doesn't work very well there. So I have missed being on the podcast. We're looking forward to the dodgeball tournament. We're going to be there. We got a team. It's only $90. So to field a team there. So not a big expense, especially when it's all going to St. Jude. But man, just excited to be back in the saddle, back with my girls at the house. Missed them, missed y'all. But man, had a wonderful trip, and we're going to have to talk about some Partners for Africa at some point, because it is an incredible thing that they've got going over there. They were even joking about they're going to start sending missionaries to the United States.
Hey, it's not a joke. Bring them on.
They are on fire, and just, man, they're thriving spiritually and just really, really doing well. So just a life-changing trip, wonderful trip, grew a lot, got re-energized. So just ready to take on the school year head on.
Well, that is a great transition, Will. I couldn't have paid you to do it any better, and you did it for free. So I appreciate it. And speaking of those experiences, speaking of team building, we're all getting ready to go back to school. I was just sitting here thinking, I'm going to be
Crazy.
teaching. Whitney's going to be teaching. Will, you're going to be teaching. Ben, you're going to be working with Mars Hill. Kenya's working with Mars Hill. And of course, I can't even forget Lindsay, who's probably the most hardcore of us all. And she's going back to school. So we're getting geared up, and it's ready or not, here we come. We just talked about Will and his cram-packed summer. Ben, I think you've spoke like 20 times in the last 7 days or something crazy like that.
It feels that way.
I got on an airplane this morning. It was actually like 5:40, more like 4:40 Central Time Zone, and flew in from Marion, Ohio after a vacation Bible school, had in service all day. And so ready or not, it's time to get ready for school. And so we wanted to jump on and talk about a few things, a few ways that in every capacity, if you're a student going back to school, we're going to touch on some things that you should be looking forward to as you start school. We've obviously got listeners who are starting college. You may be starting a new job. You may be starting a new job as a teacher. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about and using Luke 2:52 kind of as an outline. And that verse says what, Ben, to put you on the spot?
Well, it says, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So you've got these four things that Jesus grew in. And some of those we might say, well, it's just natural growth. I mean, he was naturally growing in wisdom and naturally growing in stature and in favor with God and man. But I think there's some importance to that statement too, that's kind of what we're supposed to do, both as we grow our kids as our kids grow up, which by the way, will be an interesting year for me because it will be the first and the last year that all of my kids will be in grade school of some sort. So you've got, I hope it's the last year that all five will be in it, but you've got Jackson.
Holding out hope.
Yeah. Jackson will be a senior and Cypress will be a kindergartner and the other three will be in between. So it will be an epic year in many, many ways. But yeah, Jesus grew in all those ways. That's one of the cool things about starting out the year at Mars Hill every year is that's the verse that we focus on the first day of chapel in elementary, middle school, and high school is just that concept of that's what we want to do. We want our kids to grow to be well-rounded in every way. And I think that's every school, every Christian school, at least with the wisdom, stature, and favor with God part. But I think as Christian parents, teachers, whatever, we all kind of desire that for our kids.
To be intentional, I think that's where we see the difference with Jesus in the conversation he has with his mom. They leave, he gets left behind at the temple. He says, I've got to be about my Father's business. And so you've got some younger ones. I've got some younger ones. Will, his Emmy is young. And so as parents, we kind of have to take on the role to be intentional and to saturate the atmosphere that our kids are in with God. But maybe those that can listen, your older ones, Ben, they have to be intentional themselves. There's a point where they have to take ownership of their spirituality. And so if you're of that age and you're listening to this podcast is just as much for you to be intentional. And what better time than right at the beginning? And so what's the first aspect, Ben, that you wanted to talk about from that verse?
Well, I mean, you just look at wisdom, and wisdom is one of those things that I guess I've always heard the idea of applied knowledge, that wisdom and knowledge aren't the exact same. Knowledge is kind of the knowing of things. And you might think about the three things that Lonnie talks about: facts, concepts, and application. You go to school and you learn a lot about facts, and that's why we send them to school, so that they can learn about history and math and science and all the different things. But at some point, those things have to become not just facts and not just concepts, but things that you apply to your life. And there's a lot of things I learned in high school that I probably don't use right now. But the things that I do end up using, it's important to be able to apply those things, to be able to use those things, have the wisdom to use them and know them. And so I think as parents, we have to try to help them understand, one, because I mean, y'all probably fought this battle. I know I have. You'll fight it as your kids get older. My kids are a little older than you guys. But that idea of why are we having to learn all this? What's the purpose of this? And I think as they get older, and especially as we get older in adulthood, we kind of go, oh, that was the reason I learned those things. But putting the time in to know the facts so that later I can get the concepts. And that's not just with physical or not just with academic things, but also in spiritual things.
I think it's interesting too with wisdom. The majority, of course, y'all know I'm not the smartest human being that's ever walked the earth by any stretch of the imagination, but I have gained a lot of wisdom too, just through the experiences that I've had. Whether that was in Africa, sports, the classroom, social things. So I would also like encourage all of us to not waste the experiences that we have this school year,
Yes.
because I think there can be a lot of wisdom gained even outside the classroom, whether it's at the lunch table, the sporting event, practice, the social gatherings, whatever it is. I think a lot of times we'll go to school and go, oh man, we've just got to learn. Or I even know when the kids in class, on some Sundays or Wednesdays, like, can we just take a break and just talk? And I think sometimes those experiences or just sitting and talking maybe even provide more knowledge and wisdom than sometimes sitting in the classroom and being lectured. So I would just encourage each of us too to look at the experiences that we're having and how we can grow in our wisdom even in those moments as well.
I go to your point, the experience, the intentional part of that, and the practical part for every level of learning. Because us teachers, we better continue to learn. There is a continuing of education. But to be intentional and go, I want new experiences this year. I want to try new things, but I want to try new things that are good, that even if I'm not great at them, they're going to be beneficial instead of some experiences that we know going into them, this is not beneficial. And so kind of making that list as you go into the school year of here's 4 things, 5 things that I want to try that are new, that even if I'm not great at them, or even I just outright fail, I'm not going to waste that experience. And even like spending times with teachers that challenge you. Maybe this isn't my favorite teacher, but they challenge me and I'm not going to back away from that challenge. And so I think that's great transition. Once again, Will, you're 1,000 points here into what I was thinking.
We get stuck in the rut of this is comfortable for me, and not thinking about the growth mindset of it, that I can get that fixed mindset of this is what I'm good at, or this is what's easy to me, this is what I like to learn, and that we miss out on learning in a lot of different areas. And so kind of going back to what Travis always talks about, being where your feet are. I've heard people complain about either certain teachers or certain preachers or certain subjects that they don't like, and you can complain about it and you can sit there and be mad about it, or you can take that as an opportunity to learn something new, do something different, enjoy something in some other way. And you never know. Going back to what we've said before in our challenge course, is everybody knows something you don't know and sees something you don't see. So, take the time to learn then, because you may not need it right now, but it may be something you need later, which transitions somewhat into that stature part, wisdom and stature. And the stature is kind of a physical growth. But once again, you go to Maywood and other places, and it gets frustrating when people don't want to try new sports or try a new activity because, well, I'm not good at that, or that's not something I've ever tried before. Take the time to step across that line of uncomfortableness and do something that's a little bit different for a change.
Get up, move around. We've been doing push-ups and setups. I've been doing them a lot this week while I was in Ohio, and during the day didn't have a lot to do. I was doing extra push-ups and setups. Get up, walk, get your steps in, be intentional about, not sitting in front of a computer screen all the time, doing homework all the time. If you're not a part of a sports team, or if you are and it's the spring sport, go into it. Try to be the best you can be. You only get so many opportunities to do just that. And so that would be my part on growing in stature, that we try to be a little more healthy as we get back in the classroom, as we get maybe a little less active as well.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it goes back to, I've been able to bow fish a couple of times with Lonnie, and I know Ben will say it. And when I was in Africa, the sunsets were just beautiful. I mean, like when they talk about the red sky, like it was truly a red sky. And I looked at a couple of the guys when we got back to our hotel and I was like, better enjoy it. We only get so many of these. Because I remember Lonnie saying that when I was a teenager, bow fishing. And it's just like, why not try? I was kayaking today with some boys and I was kind of giving one down the road about asking this girl out. I was like, what's the worst that's going to happen? She's going to say no. Who cares? I think sometimes in life, it's just more enjoyable when we take that step, and we do some things that can bring a lot of fun. I remember the first time the guy in Tennessee said, "Hey, I want you to run a half marathon with me." It's like, you're an idiot, man. And now we've raised like over $30,000 for St. Jude. It's just like, just because one guy said, "Hey, let's go for it," he was like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Somebody's going to walk past you. Yeah. And
the other day
it did.
Learn how to do some of those things just for the sake of one day your kids may want to do that. One day some of your family members may want to just have a pickup game of volleyball. Learn how to hit a volleyball, throw a baseball, hit a wiffle ball, whatever, just so that you can spend a little time with them. I think it seemed like Jesus enjoyed spending time with his disciples. I don't know that he did any of those things, but just that idea of growing in our wisdom, but also growing physically to be able to do some things.
Well, I appreciate you guys saying that because you've all seen my golf swing. What's next, Ben?
Favor with God. I think the most important one, having that relationship and growing in that relationship with God.
I don't know where all our listeners go to school, where they work, but I'd be willing to guess that most of our listeners go somewhere where there is a Christian example, a strong Christian example. And so I would challenge students or employees or whatever as the school starts, kind of almost another reset. We always have January 1st reset and then school starting back, kind of a reset. Make your way to those people. I would almost say cling to those people, spend time with those people, be intentional about allowing them to mentor and influence you. It doesn't have to be a formal meeting of, hey, I'd like for you to mentor me, but find those people to stick around and to see their example. I think that even though I was in the youth group growing up, Ben and I went to Jacksonburg together, there were teachers that I had Greg Dial, I had Coach Morris, but I didn't spend a lot of time with those guys. And they were football coaches, but I didn't go out of my way to kind of be with them when I could be. Obviously, there was a teacher-student disconnect a little bit there, but you find that person that is an example of Christ in whatever situation you're in. And sometimes you have to be intentional, kind of go out of your way to be with that person so that you're being challenged, because we're inundated, big word, with worldly negative things a lot. And so making a point to spend time with the people who are going to influence you for good, especially those maybe in an authority situation.
1 Corinthians 11:1, imitate me as I imitate Christ. That's what Paul said. So kind of bringing a point to what Travis is saying about spending time with those people. The reason we try to find those people to spend time with who challenge us spiritually is because as we spend time with them, it's as if we're spending time with Jesus, because they have made their lives about Jesus. Spend time with people who've made their lives about Jesus so that you can be built up. I mean, that's why I like spending time with you guys, is that I get challenged to be more like Jesus. And I get challenged, to walk a little bit better and do a little bit better in my daily walk with Christ, because I'm walking with people who've decided to walk with him.
Yeah, I think this one to me is the easier said than done, right? Like everybody knows it, yet it's still one of the hardest things to do. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or I'm just maybe going 9 different directions at the same time. But it's like I've started setting more and more reminders in my phone. And it's bad that I have to set a reminder to pray or to read this or do this. But it's like I would try and encourage all of us just to be a little bit more intentional in this area. because people go, well, just get up 15 minutes earlier. Like that just doesn't work for me because I can't do it. I mean, y'all know the way I sleep. So just taking that extra step to go, I'm going to be reminded. And y'all mentioned spending time with those spiritual people, but just maybe even people that will hold you accountable, not just encourage, but keep you right there in that space. So I would just try and find something practical. I love getting in other people's cars and seeing like sticky notes of Bible verses on the dashboard or things like that. And maybe that's what you need to do. I had a guy that I went to school with that every day he got up and he would draw a cross on his hand. He had an ink pen beside his bed. And I don't know that that's probably healthy to draw it every single day, but worked for him, and he said that was my reminder that before I left, I was going to draw that cross, and it just centered me and it allowed me to start my day off right.
And then the final one is to grow in favor with man. I think that growing in favor with God should be a natural that makes me treat others better.
It doesn't always seem to be way these days.
And I think that's the point. You have to get to the point. Once again, you've got to be intentional and go, I want to be closer to God. I want to please God. And a lot of times we break that down into a checklist. And really, it always boils down to how we treat our neighbor and how we're intentionally going out of our way. And I know sometimes we use the example of going and sitting with someone who doesn't have somebody sitting with them. And that is a great example. I know students sometimes who are like, no, I just need to be alone. That's fine too. But how we treat each other is a example of how we love God. You can't do one without the other. And I think that's one of the major issues Jesus had. That's one of the major issues the prophets had, was you're doing all these things. I guess the best example is from Isaiah. Jesus quotes, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And so growing in favor with man doesn't mean they're always going to appreciate what you're trying to do for them. Doesn't mean that they're always going to take it the right way, but we can't control someone else's response. We can only kind of control what we're going to do in our attitude.
Well, and to that, think about that when I said that earlier, that it doesn't always work that way, or it doesn't always seem that way, is people, it seems like today more than any, there's this idea of people look at the church as we're not loving, we're not helpful. To be a part of God is to shun and hurt the people around us because, we stand against things. But, here's this example of Jesus who says, I'm going to grow in favor with God, but also the way that I'm going to reach people is I'm going to have relationships with people. I'm going to grow in favor, with not just other Christians, but with the people in the world around me. And that's why we saw Jesus have those connections with people who maybe lived worse lifestyles, not the kind of lifestyle that he's calling us to, but in a sense, trying to help us make those connections so that we can also change them and help them see the life that's better for them.
The passage that comes to my mind, I just pulled up, was Matthew 5:46. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? And then he goes on like, don't the tax collectors, they even love the people that love them. And so I think this idea too of favor with God and man is not, I think so many times that's where we fall. Like, I just want my group to be these Christian people that are like-minded. And yes, I agree with that, but we have a job to love the people that are in the world, to show them the love of Jesus. Just another challenge, love people that are different than you.
It's amazing what you see from him in the Gospels of both children were coming to him and religious leaders, both those who are hurting and those who, seem to be having a pretty good life at that moment. People who were sick, people who were well. I mean, you've got everybody from every walk of life, people who were really, really stuck in sin, to people who maybe didn't think they had sin. And you got Jesus hanging with all of those people in a way of helping them understand, one, if you were prideful, that was wrong. If you thought you had it all together, you probably were wrong. And if you were doing and living in some of those ways that were contrary to the things that basically breaks down to, things that aren't good for you. It's not that he's just doing that because he's got this random set of rules. It's, hey, the things that you're doing are going to lead to pain and heartache. So I'm trying to help you with that. But it's just amazing that it didn't matter who the people were or what they were going through. He made time to talk to them.
We are very thankful for Challenge Youth Conference continued support of this podcast and their partnership in raising funds for St. Jude through the Staying Alive Dodgeball Tournament. The purpose of Challenge Youth Conference is to meet the needs of our church teenagers who are growing up in a society that is often indifferent to living a life for Christ. CYC's mission is to present a program utilizing solid and sound scriptural emphasis. Our vision is to maintain a positive program which empowers our teenagers with sound teaching that challenges and encourages them to live their lives for Christ. CYC Dallas will be on the weekend of January 13th through the 15th, and the Pigeon Forge dates are February 24th through the 26th. You can email info@cyconline.com or go to cyconline.com to learn more information. We hope to see you there. And you mentioned pain, and you know what I like to do that is a great transition from pain and loving people is I love to throw dodgeballs at people. And so the Staying Alive Dodgeball Tournament question of the day is, as we go back to school, and this is not an exhaustive list, but give me some of your favorite teachers, and I'll start and give you guys a chance to think. But one is Mrs. Miller that I had at Central High School. She was my history teacher. And we sometimes think of teachers as mean, and sometimes teachers are mean. But sometimes it's just they have a high standard for you to live up to. And I think that Miss Miller was kind of a balance of both, and I loved her for it, right? There was a general, I'm going to put you in your place, but I also have this high standard. So I love me some, and they're both history teachers that I'm going to mention, and you know where I'm going, Ben. But Mrs. Miller and Greg Massey from good old Freed-Hardeman University, who was not above putting people in their place if necessary, from historical figures to students. And so I'm rolling with Mrs. Miller from Central High School, high school history, and Dr. Greg Massey, Freed-Hardeman history department.
From Mars Hill, I've got two. Lisa Grossheim was just government economics teacher, just a blast to be around. And then when I was in high school, Halo was on the computers, and she would come in and play Halo with us if everyone finished their work. So you're not going to find a better teacher than someone that's willing to play Halo with you on the computer. I have to also shout out Karen Mann. Karen was my high school English teacher. She was she was very creative. We know Karen as being extremely creative.
Yes.
And just the way she allowed us to do things. She didn't pigeonhole anybody into doing things her way, and kind of gave us the freedom to ride and do things the way we saw it, which I always thought was, I love teachers that helped me learn how to think. And she was one of those. And then that takes me to college. And I got to go with Dan the Man, Brother Dan Winkler. He was my Bible class teacher, of course, one of my coworkers for 5 years. But what I loved about Brother Dan is after you took a test, he would grade it in front of you, or you would grade your own, and then he would let you debate him on whether or not the question was unfair, and like his true or false, or like discussion questions. And if you debated him well enough in front of the class, then he would reverse it and give you credit. I can shout out and say that I won a few of those debates and got some extra points back.
Very nice.
So it was a lot of fun.
I'll start college and go back. One of my favorite humans on the planet is Mark Blackwelder. Blackwelder was awesome. Loved
Add him to my list.
His Bible class. Yeah. And of course, I've mentioned this a time or two. Mark Crowell was a great teacher, but also was a counselor for me when I went through some tough stuff. So I'd have to give him a shout out for that part of it. I liked him as a teacher, but probably Mark Blackwelder was my favorite teacher. Come back down to high school, and man, there's just so many I could name. I loved Miss Sweeney, Beeb Sweeney. gave me a good mindset about nature. And I mean, she was tough. She probably got me ready for college more than any single person because her class was extremely hard. But just love of animals. She had snakes in her room and squirrels and all kinds of stuff. So that was always cool. I loved chorus. I really, really enjoyed my time in that class as well with Miss Powell. We did a lot of traveling. So it's kind of a toss up there. Middle school, I'm going to say middle school. I think he taught my middle school Bible class. It was at least really early in high school, would have been Coach Pinnell. So love some Ronnie Pinnell classes. Very practical. I've still got my Bibles where I marked up James and 1st and 2nd Peter. And then if I went all the way back to elementary, which at the time was elementary, now it's middle school, was Mike Tays was probably one of my favorites there.
Well, guys, I appreciate your time. I know we're all tired, just in time to get fired up to go to school. And the only person we can blame is ourselves because we totally signed ourselves up for it. Try to get some rest, and we'll talk at you guys later.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.